Baru was once the revered leader of a mighty lion pride in the dry savannas of Central Africa, where the earth cracks under the burning sun and scattered acacia trees stand like tiny shadows against a sea of golden grass. With a roar that echoed across 8 kilometers, Baru could turn herds of antelope and make challengers bow their heads. But no throne stands forever against time. Django, a younger, stronger male with eyes like fire and a stride full of ambition, had risen from within Baru's own pride. As the dry season neared its end, the inevitable battle for dominance began. Beneath a scorching sun, the two lions clashed amid swirling dust and hot winds, claws slashing, teeth bared, their roars thundering across the open plains. Baru fought with the heart of a king who had ruled with pride, but his body had been worn down by a lingering digestive illness, and age had stolen the reflexes that once defined him. In the end, he fell, not in shame, but in honor. A deep bite at his flank, a fractured shoulder, fur stained with blood and red dust, Baru was cast out. No longer king, he had no place. As dawn broke, the pride, now led by Django, parted silently, allowing the defeated to walk away. No farewell roar, no lingering glance. The lionesses kept their cubs away from him, as if distancing themselves from a chapter now closed. Baru walked alone. Across the parched savanna, the late-season winds carried the scent of charred grass in the rasping whispers of dry blades brushing against one another. He dragged his body through thorny acacia shrubs, across the bed of a river long dried up, over land as cracked and weary as his spirit. Blood oozed slowly from his wounds, his sides swollen, his belly twisting in hunger. No pride, no name, no one left to witness the wounds of a fallen king. Only sunlight, dust, and the cold wind sweeping across the savanna, whispering a quiet farewell. But the savanna is never without hunters. Weary footsteps, broken breath, and the scent of fresh blood. All of it a siren call for the hyenas stalking from the shade as the evening dies. In the scorched heart of the savanna, where golden grass reached up to a man's chest, lions and hyenas were sworn enemies, competing for prey, territory, and survival, yet never sharing the same shadow. They were ancient rivals, locked in a blood-bound war where every encounter meant death. For a scrap of bone, a pool of blood, or sometimes vengeance passed down from one generation to the next. Baru had once been the nightmare of hyenas, especially the Trigoma clan, scattered across the southern dry lake region. 3 dry seasons ago, at the peak of his power, Baru had slain their matriarch after they dared to stalk his cubs. His claws had torn through her throat in a single thunderous strike, sending the rest of the pack fleeing, their shrieks echoing in chaos. Hyenas do not forget, and they do not forgive. 3 years passed. The Chigoma grew stronger, tougher, and they waited. Now, Baru, the once feared king, was limping across the savanna, his wounds bleeding, his breath shallow, and his once proud eyes dulled by pain and exhaustion. A starving pack of 8 hyenas, thin but wild-eyed with the scent of blood, had been trailing him for 2 days and nights. They knew he was sick. They smelled the rot from a distance, and more than anything, they recognized him. As the sun dipped low and bathed the sky in shades of fire, Baru finally found a shallow pool of stagnant water nestled among low acacia roots, a place once visited by antelope. He lowered his head, too thirsty to care about danger, unaware that death lurked in the shifting grass behind him. No warning, no signal, they attacked. A bite landed perfectly on his hind leg, dropping Baru to the ground. Another hyena launched itself at his neck from the side, canines sinking deep into his weathered hide. A shrill cackle rose, the cry not of one predator, but of a full-blown nightmare sweeping in like a storm. Baru roared, the instinct of a lion who had once ruled. But the sound no longer shook the savanna. It only startled a few guinea fowl into fluttering from the earth. He twisted, struck back, his claws still sharp, one swipe enough to make a hyena retreat. But there were too many, and he was far too weak. One latched onto his thigh. Another tugged at his ear. They swarmed, dragging down the lion who had once symbolized dominance and fear. Baru fought not for victory, but to cling to the last shred of dignity. Every breath he drew was a gasp, every roar a flicker of defiance. Blood soaked the dust beneath him. Red earth, red fur, fading strength. And then, his eyes, once fire, were hollow. No fury, no pride, just a quiet plea. Not for power, not for revenge, only a hope, fragile and silent, that someone or something would come. Before his final roar was silenced by the teeth of the dark. The sand-colored jeep carved a path through low acacia bushes in the afternoon savanna, leaving a long trail of dust behind like a comet's tail across the cracked, thirsty earth. Dr. Malik Kamau had just finished surveying a new water source 17 kilometers from the research station after a long, hot, uneventful day. He turned on the radio, ready to head back, but then a sound. Barely a whisper, yet sharp enough to chill his spine. A high-pitched screech choked with snarls and despair. Not the wind, not an antelope, he muttered, and Malik stopped the jeep. Silence. Wind. The savanna glowed red gold, as if burning under the weight of the setting sun. He turned the wheel. The GPS showed nothing unusual, but his heart and the instincts of a man who'd spent his life among dying creatures were screaming. "Something's there," he whispered, then slammed the gas, doubling back toward the place he'd passed not 10 minutes before. When his jeep skidded into a patch of trampled grass, he froze. A clearing, stained red. Scattered bird corpses. Blood soaked into dry dirt. And in the center, a large male lion, skin and bone, soaked in blood and dust, surrounded by 8 hyenas. He recognized him immediately. Oh, God. Baru. Baru was still fighting. His eyes, nearly clouded, stayed fixed on one hyena tearing into his hind leg. Another had leapt onto his back, shrieking like a demon. Blood sprayed from Baru's abdomen, a gaping wound, and the lion was beginning to collapse. Malik didn't hesitate. He snatched the ultrasonic whistle from the seat pocket and cranked it to max. The piercing screech sliced the air, startling the hyenas for a split second. At the same time, he ripped the cap off a smoke flare and fired it into the sky. A burst of red light shredded the amber twilight, and the boom shook the earth. A few hyenas backed off, startled. But they didn't run. This was the savanna. This was blood law. This was a hunt they'd waited days to finish. One hyena lunged, straight at Malik. He fell. The stun baton flew from his hand. The beast's jaws clamped down on his left arm, teeth slicing through the fabric of his shirt and into flesh. Blood instantly soaked the sleeve. Malik screamed, but twisted hard, slamming his heel into the hyena's ribs. He rolled, reached for the baton, and struck. A brutal blow to the head. The hyena yelped and staggered back. Malik rose, shaking, blood dripping from his arm to the ground. But his eyes never left Baru. The lion lay in a pool of his own blood, but his gaze was still fixed on Malik. Not in fear, in trust, in hope. Not today, Malik panted through clenched teeth. You're not dying today, my friend. He stepped between Baru and the hyenas. His blood stained the dry grass. The wind whipped through his torn shirt. But Malik didn't move. One man, against a pack of night hunters. The hyenas circled, snarling, pacing. One hissed, then they left. Not in a rush, not in fear, but as if they understood that the man before them was ready to die with the lion they once feared and still hated. They vanished into the tall grass, leaving behind the stench of blood, the haze of smoke, and a savanna ablaze in the red fire of sunset. Baru lay motionless, his body soaked in blood and coated in red dust. His chest rose and fell as if each breath were its own private war. His eyes fluttered open for the briefest moment, and in that hazy frame he saw a familiar figure. Not a pride mate, not an old rival, but a man. The one who had stood against a pack of night hunters to save a fallen king. Dr. Malik Kamau knelt beside him, his left arm still bleeding beneath a temporary bandage, sweat and dust streaking across his forehead. Ignoring the ache pounding through every bone in his body, he leaned in and whispered into the lion's ear, "You're not done. There's still a way back." Baru blinked slowly. He had no strength left to roar, no fire left to resist. But in those clouded eyes, there was something. A flicker, a stirring of trust, of surrender, not to death, but to care. Malik called his assistant via satellite radio. A stretcher was deployed and a field medical station hastily assembled from the back of his jeep. An IV line was inserted into Baru's front leg. Though his pulse was so faint, the needle had to be repositioned 3 times before it found the vein. Baru didn't fight back. He lay still as the humans administered fluids, checked his vitals, cleaned and wrapped the wounds as if, for the first time in weeks, he understood no one was there to take his life, but to hold on to it. Night fell over the savanna. Cold wind swept through the low acacia groves. Stars pierced the sky in silver pinpricks. Malik didn't move an inch from Baru's side. He lit a fire to keep predators at bay and laid a thermal blanket across the lion's labored body. There were moments, long, terrifying moments, when Baru's heart nearly stopped. His eyes closed, his chest stilled, and Malik thought he had lost him. He placed his hand over Baru's chest, a faint heartbeat, barely there, but still there. "Don't go," he whispered, almost pleading. "Not after all you've survived, not like this." And then, like a breeze catching the edge of flame, Baru opened his eyes. Maybe it was instinct, maybe it was luck, or perhaps the savanna had granted one last miracle. His breath began to steady. The 3rd saline infusion took hold. His body temperature began to rise, and at around 4 a.m., Baru lifted his head, for just a moment, and looked at Malik. His eyes still clouded, but reflecting the flicker of firelight. At dawn, the rescue helicopter arrived. The medical team, the stretcher crew, they froze when they saw it. A 400-pound male lion lying quietly beside a man, as if the doctor were the last surviving member of his pride. Malik wouldn't let anyone lift Baru except himself and the 2 who'd stayed through the night. "We survived hell together," he told the flight crew. "No one takes him without me." And so, under the golden skies of the savanna, the helicopter lifted off, carrying not just a lion who had once been written off for dead, but a man whose arm still bled and whose eyes had never burned more brightly. Baru survived that night, not because of medicine, not because of science, but because someone reached out just in time, and because one unwavering gaze called his soul back from the edge. Baru had escaped death, But the savanna, like a wound that refuses to close, doesn't forget the scent of blood. After 3 days at the emergency field station nestled near the foot of Nyota Hill, where Dr. Malik Kamau's team had set up a temporary recovery post before transporting Baru to the central facility, things seemed to be stabilizing. Each morning, Malik cleaned his wounds, changed the bandages, adjusted the IV fluids, and listened carefully to the heartbeat that had once nearly stopped. Baru was too weak to stand, but his eyes had regained life. Every time Malik approached, he twitched an ear, a breath-light response, like a whisper from a soul learning to trust again. But darkness wasn't done. On the 4th night, thunderclouds veiled the sky, the GPS signal was lost due to static storms, and the savanna screamed again. That sound, the one that froze Malik's blood the last time. A long, ragged screech, then the soft crunch of dry grass under many feet. Hyenas. Not 8, not 10. This time, a full clan, more than 20. They had returned, not to hunt, but to finish what they believed should never have been left alive. Baru, the lion who once killed their matriarch. Malik, the human who had robbed them of vengeance. Malik grabbed his night vision scope. Eyes, dozens of glowing eyes, creeping in from 3 sides. They'd learned. No reckless charges. This was a siege. They were coordinated, like soldiers. He knew if they reached the enclosure, Baru wouldn't survive a second time. No time to call for backup. No one else was coming. Just him. Malik sprinted to the jeep, flung open the gear hatch. Flares, ultrasonic blasters, smoke grenades, stun batons, pulse strobes, everything he'd ever used against poachers and elephant chasers. He grabbed it all. Then he ran to the temporary enclosure where Baru lay, still sleeping beneath a thermal blanket, unaware that death was again approaching, closer than fever. The hyenas emerged like ghosts, their screeches sliced through the night. The alpha, huge with a scar slashing from eye to snout, let out a guttural growl. The signal they were preparing to strike. Malik planted himself in front of the cage entrance, panting. The wound in his arm had reopened. Blood trickled anew. But in his other hand, he gripped the ultrasonic whistle. Boom! A flare exploded in the midst of the pack. Scream! The whistle screamed like death incarnate. Flash! Flash! Strobe lights snapped again and again, blinding, disorienting. Malik roared, a primal human cry of rage, defiance, and survival. I'm right here. You want him. Come through me. One hyena, bolder than the rest, charged. Malik didn't dodge. He ran toward it. The impact slammed him down, but his hand didn't let go. He jabbed the stun baton into the beast's chest. It howled in pain and fled. And slowly, so did the others. Not because they feared Malik, but because they understood. This man wouldn't break, and the creature behind him would not be taken. Not tonight. The wind whispered through the ridges. The hyenas vanished like smoke. And there he was. Malik, trembling, bleeding, gasping for breath, on his knees beside Baru. Blood from his mouth, from his torn shoulder, from his cracked palms. Baru stirred. His eyes opened. He didn't roar. He didn't move. But he looked at Malik. And in that gaze, there was a message. You stood by me again. You're mad, but you're one of my pride. Baru lived. He survived 2 infections, severe blood loss, and early-stage multi-organ failure. More than 40 wounds were stitched by trembling hands in field conditions where even light was a luxury. blood was transfused into his body over 48 straight hours, each IV drip a narrow bridge between life and death. Malik, no ordinary doctor, pitched his tent beside the recovery pen, refusing to return to the main station, refusing the bed, the comfort, even the nurse support. Each night, he sat outside the bars, silently reading, journaling, and counting every breath of the lion he had silently named. Kiongozi, Swahili for the one who leads. At first, Baru barely moved, but then the miracle began. One morning, as Malik stepped through the mesh gate, Baru let out a soft growl, not to warn, not to threaten, but to greet. No fangs, no fury, just a sound that said, "I know it's you." When Malik walked away to fetch medicine, Baru, still weak, tried to turn his head to follow him. A small movement, but enough to leave the entire research team frozen in silence. And for the first time since the day he was cast out from his pride, Baru leaned forward and gently pressed his head into a man's hand. A slow nudge, as if saying, "You are not of my kind, but I remember what you did." But what stunned the world happened one quiet afternoon, under a gentle drizzle. Malik returned after a long shift at a nearby station. As he approached the recovery area, he stopped. A small bundle of dry grass and leaves sat neatly outside his tent. He chuckled. "Who's playing romantic games out here in the savanna?" But no one from the team had done it. No one had been near. And when he turned, Baru lay watching him, his head resting on crossed paws, his eyes deep and unwavering. Dry grass, savanna leaves, a touch of earth still soaked with morning dew. Baru, a wild lion once hunted, once feared, had used the same jaws that once tore down hyenas to gather twigs and leaves into the crudest, simplest gift, a bouquet from the savanna. No ribbon, no bow, only meaning. A thank you, spoken in the language of dust and instinct, offered to the one who had shouldered life when he himself had let go. Malik stepped forward, saying nothing. He sat down, lifted the humble gift from the ground, placed a hand on the metal bar, and whispered, "Thank you, my friend. And I'm sorry that this world ever made you hurt that much." Baru blinked slowly, then rested his chin back on his paws, like a house cat settling beside someone it trusts. The bond was complete, not built from chains, not born from food, but woven from trust, stronger than instinct, deeper than species, beyond what any science can ever explain. We often think wild creatures do not love, do not ache, do not despair. But in Baru's eyes, once the ruler of the savanna, then abandoned, hunted, and nearly dead, I saw waiting. And when I reached out my hand, he didn't roar. He chose to believe. Dr. Malik Kamau, Baru lived for 4 more years, 4 rainy seasons, 4 dry seasons, 4 times watching sunlight fall through the steel mesh, across skies no longer threatening. He was never returned to the wild. His spinal injuries never fully healed. But he was never alone again. A section of the Western Savanna Reserve was named the Baru Enclosure, a semi-wild habitat where he lived without chains, without cages, under medical care, yet in freedom. There, the soil ran red, the trees stayed low, and the golden sun felt like a gentle farewell every day. Baru no longer hunted, but he learned to watch the sky. He still roared each morning, each time the sun kissed the horizon, but it was no longer a roar of dominance. It was a symphony. I'm still here. And whenever Dr. Malik arrived, Rain or shine, Baru would walk closer, nudge his head gently, and release a soft, breath-like sound. The entire staff knew. Baru hadn't just survived, he had chosen Malik as his final pride. One afternoon, after an 8-hour shift in the sun, Malik sat beside him. "You know," he whispered, "I had lost all faith in people, lost my wife in the riots, lost my old station to trophy hunting policies. I came here thinking it was just me and the animals who could still be honest with each other." Baru lay still, eyes half open, breathing steadily. Malik didn't expect a reply, but he kept talking. "But you saved me, Baru. I was the one stitching your wounds. You were the one stitching my faith." They say survivors are the ones who tell the story, but sometimes the greatest survivor is the one who cannot speak. Baru's story spread around the world not through roars, but through silent footage. Footage where he pressed his forehead against Malik's shoulder in quiet affection. Millions watched. Thousands wrote letters. A child in Japan wrote, "I've never seen a lion say thank you." A retired soldier from Canada shared, "Baru's story made me cry for the first time in 30 years. Because I too was once broken, and someone didn't give up on me." Baru passed on a quiet morning, no pain, no struggle. He simply lay down in the warm light of the late dry season. Malik sat beside him, holding his paw. He said nothing. Just a gentle touch, like that first moment when Baru had chosen to trust instead of roar. The entire reserve paused operations for 24 hours. A handful of red soil from the spot where Baru lay, mixed with dry grass, was placed in a small museum at the Malik station, under a plaque that read, "Baru, the survivor, the forgiver, the guide." And the final lesson came not from teeth or scars, but from a gaze. In the eyes of a lion once discarded, the world saw itself again. A being that was once mighty, then fallen, then so weak it no longer wanted to fight. But then, someone, just someone, didn't look away. Baru taught us, no one is too far gone to be loved, no one is too wild to be understood. No one is too different to belong to something greater. He wasn't just a lion, he was a memory of life itself. A living truth that some things transcend species, language, even instinct. Dr. Malik Kamau, at Baru's Memorial 2024. Baru is gone, but he didn't leave. He lives on -- in the children who now dream of becoming veterinarians, in the conservationists who change their approach to predators, in the low roars of wind that sweep across the savanna, where people still tell of a lion who once died, but was called back by the voice of a human. And when you look into the eyes of a creature you think is numb, voiceless, or wild, maybe, just maybe, you'll see that flicker of light, the one first lit between a lion and a man, beneath the endless savanna, in the space where trust is stronger than fear.